Welcome to another episode of the Stuck Mic AvCast, and today we have a really special guest on. You know, for over 75 years, JAARs, Jungle Aviation and Relay Service, has dedicated itself to covering the last mile of missions through aviation, typically involving transport of missionaries, translators, and logistical support. JAARs has established itself as a leader in missionary aviation in the world's green band of rainforests and jungle regions. Steve Russell is the president of JAARs, and he joins us to discuss the valuable role of JAARs that plays in that new direction also of JAARs, which is MedEvac missions. Well, welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you, Carl. It's great, and I appreciate all you do.
Yeah, thanks so much. And also, Leslie, it's good to see you back on the show, and welcome from Bentonville.
Glad to be back, Carl, and nice to meet you, Steve.
Yeah, good to meet you.
This is really exciting for Leslie because she spent a life in ministry and around ministry, and this is going to be exciting for us because, you know, we're very supportive of all the mission flying out there, especially JAARs. First of all, a lot of people may not know what JAARs is and what they do. I summarized it, but let's get a little more granular and maybe a little bit of history of JAARs, Steve.
It's we have a great documentary that you can find on our website at jaars.org, JAARS.org, called Whatever It Takes. It was done by Emmy Award-winning producer. It's very good, covers our early story. But basically what happened was you had a young man, he and his college buddy, they went down to Guatemala to sell Bibles. 17, World War I broke out. He ends up not going. He got a deferment, and he does missions. He lives with this village. They couldn't speak his language. He couldn't speak theirs. He learns it, unravels a ball of yarn of the catch-kill Indian language, translates it into a gospel, and then the four gospels. Next thing you know, he comes back and he founds what became SIL Global, which owns the ethnologue of every language in the world for the United Nations today. It got a very small start in Arkansas. It was done at a Summer Institute of Linguistics, which is what SIL was called. He had a passion, though, to get to remote parts of the planet. And how would you do that? He was fascinated by Bert Dargue, and I know you're a big aviation history buff. Bert Dargue did the very first circumnavigation with, I think, like Douglas Cruiser-type biplanes in the 1920s. Made a name for himself. We have actual correspondence between Cam Townsend and Bert Dargue, who was killed in World War II as a general, one of the few actual generals that was killed in combat. And he asked him, how could we get airplanes into remote jungles, and would that be viable? And Major Dargue at the time, he said, yeah, and they all lay it out, and he came up with the concept for what became Jungle Aviation and Radio Service at that time. The Depression hit. He wasn't able to do that. World War II hit. But after World War II, he really wanted to go with that passion, and SIL and Wycliffe, which was the public face, Wycliffe Bible Translators, was the public face of the missionaries. And then JAARs became the logistical and transportation piece for that group. And the main thing that we do today is really not changed since 1948. We reduce barriers, ease burdens, and deliver God's word. We do that by training, equipping, deploying, and sustaining those that are in what we call the green band. We operate in all three of the major rainforests on the planet. We started in Peru in 1948. We still have operations down there. We work in the Amazonian rainforest, the Congolese rainforest, and then if you keep spinning the globe out to the Melanesian rainforest. What are we talking about? 6,000 people on a jungle mountaintop. They're the only ones that speak that language. Nobody else speaks it. Papua New Guinea, for example, has 835 languages. One country. I mean, it's just bizarre. Vanuatu, out on the Melanesian chain, 118 languages, 3.5 million people. So that's about the population of my home state of Oklahoma. Imagine every town you go to speaks a different language. And that's what they're facing. And then do that in a jungle. Our folks can land on a 19% slope 800-foot, one way in, surrounded by a bowl of mountains, same way out, mountain in front of you now instead of coming in. Many of their approaches will be beta, where they literally are coming down. It's amazing. I've gotten out to most of our remote places, or at least our main programs, and gotten out into many of these remote villages. And it's extraordinary level of aviation, unlike anything else that exists out there. It's a unique aspect of flying, unlike anything else. Most of the airstrips aren't even on the charts of any kind.
Most of those airstrips would be hard to even stand on.
They would, and they're hand-carved, many of them. It might take 3 or 4 years by the locals that are literally with hand tools carving out enough space to land our aircraft. We started, our first aircraft was a Grumman J2F Duck, a big beast of a biplane, amphibian, World War II, real workhorse. We had PBY Catalinas, DC-3s, a lot of old World War II aircraft was really what we started with, and then lighter aircraft. Over the years, 1955, we fielded serial number 1 of the Helio Courier, and that's really the one that we are well known and associated with. We even have it on the logo of our, of JAARs. And that's where a lot of the demonstration flying at Sun and Fun and, AirVenture, a lot of the air shows where people have seen JAARs do these demos. Cam saw it driving past Tulsa, Oklahoma, heading to Arkansas one time, and he saw this plane just shoot up. And he's like, what is that? And so they divert and they go over and they talk to this guy and wait for him to land. He's like, what is this? And he says, this, sir, is a Helio Courier, and we're building them in Wichita, Kansas. And he's like, well, how do I get in touch? So he shows up. In 1955, they're just now starting the company, and they're all excited. They said, well, Mr. Townsend, what can we do for you? He says, I think we need this to go to the jungles. And he says, well, how can we help you? He says, well, I think we're going to need about 6 of these aircraft. And so they got real excited. And they said, well, what kind of deposit would you like to put down? He says, we don't have any money. He said, but God will provide it, and we'll get it. Well, they'd written him off. But not only did he get it, we fielded about 50 Helio Couriers in our history and had as many as 36 flying on the field at one time. We have 2 left. One we still use in training, and the other one we use as both a trainer and also as our mascot, which is the Helio Courier called Tonya. That little airplane has flown on 3 continents, and it's done wonderful service in JAARs. It's been with us since 1971, and we're going to keep it in perpetuity, much like P-51, belongs to the Air Force heritage or whatever. We're going to keep that as a part of our fleet. Today, we fly Pilatus Porters. We fly Kodiak 100s. We have a Pilatus PC-12 as well. We use a lot of Cessna 206 Golf models. They're workhorses. We use them no more in Asia, but we do use them some in Africa and then a lot in South America and Peru. We've got, I'm trying to think what else in our fleet. That's really the mainstay. We have caravans, several caravans, Cessna caravans. It would be nice to kind of be type specific with them, but it's not always easily done. Depending upon the terrain, the type of jungle, the type of mountainous jungle, or whether it's lowland swamp, it will really determine the best suited type of aircraft. And we operate float planes, and we have 5 helicopters in our fleet. So a lot going on. And 2 ships. We operate 2 ships, one in the Solomon Sea, and then one that we're using in our training base that will train crews for and deploy to the Solomon Sea to join its sister ship there eventually.
You have every, shore, field, and takeoff landing type of aircraft out there. I'm curious why they started with more of the amphibious aircraft. Do you know why they did that?
In the Amazon, as they meander, and of course, we're familiar with horseshoe lakes and that sort of thing. Well, when the Amazon makes a horseshoe lake, it's like massive. And They started in a remote area of the Amazon jungle called Yarinacocha near present-day Pucallpa, Peru. And that was a big lake, but it was perfect. They were able to get into that station, and it was supplied. We had PBY Catalinas, we had the Grumman duck, we had de Havilland beaver, and there was something else. I was trying to think, a Canadian big radial float plane that we used.
Twin otter or an otter.
Yeah, it was something. No, it wasn't a twin. It was a single. I can't remember the name of it. But we used a lot of World War II surplus aircraft because we could get them pretty cheap. Same way when we got into helicopters, we bought a lot of surplus Hillers, and we flew those well into the 1990s. Now we've got Bells and Robinsons, so it's a little better.
This is a lot of aircraft for that mission. So if someone was to get into this as a career or as a calling for them, would they have to be trained in all these different aircraft?
No, but what they would need to do, let's say that you had a calling to missions. One, it's important you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior. That's kind of important to everything that we do. We also have a passion for the Word of God and getting that to people that don't have it in their language. If you have that type of relationship and calling, a lot of people don't think that you can serve in missions following your wiring. Maybe they're a good wrench or they're a good stick. Maybe they have a wiring to do these technical things. And a lot of times people think to be a missionary, I've got to be a theologian or something. And that's not true at all. We liken ourselves as the blue-collar missionaries, and we take others to where they need to get to so that they can do important work that they do. But we're missionaries in our own right. We have men and women that fly and also mechanic. Our very first pilot was loaned to us to get our program started, Elizabeth Betty Green, and she was our very first pilot. Pint-sized tough lady gets out and flies in the Grumman duck, and she gets out of this huge plane, and they're all looking at her like, who is this? So we've had women in our ranks from the very beginning and do even today. We had a couple of chief pilots in our programs even today. So a lot of opportunity there. You have to have, obviously, a set of skills. Typically 500 hours, instrument, commercial, tailwheel. Probably 90% of our pilots are also mechanics with an A&P license. It's not required in our larger programs. Some of our mechanics would prefer, hey, just go fly and leave the mechanics to us. But if you're in a smaller program, you break down, you got to fix it. So it's not out of the norm that most of our pilots are pilot mechanics. Not required, but most are. That's a lot of training, everything I just said.
That sure is.
It can also be expensive. Missionaries are not known for the wealth that they accumulate. And people that would run off to the airlines or they go off to some type of commercial aviation endeavor, that offers a lot more incentive than what we offer. But I tell you, I've done a lot of things in my lifetime. I was an infantry soldier, veteran of 3 wars, did 21 years in the military. I had 10 years of politics, was a member of Congress. I've done a lot of different things. But I got to tell you, Carl, this is the most important work I've ever done. Yeah. It's just amazing. You get out and you see these folks that have literally nothing. And you're standing there and they come and greet you holding their bows and arrows and spears and machetes and, there to protect you, not hurt you. And they gather under the wings and you're just looking at them and you say, God loves them as much as he loves me. He died for them as much as he died for me. Christ did. And I have God's word. They don't. And it might take 30 years for them to get it. And that's not really economical to fly 30 years to take a couple of missionaries to and from a village for 6,000 people. There's no return on investment for that if you're looking at it corporately. but how do you put a price on it? And that's what we do. And we've been doing that for 78 years. And it's very rewarding work.
Along with the mission and getting the word out, there's a lot of humanitarian work you do.
There is.
Regardless of your background, I'm curious, it might be a hard question to answer. Over the years, have you seen your support change, either for the better or for the worse? And what has affected that as far as support from people?
Yeah, it's a great question. Early on, I mean, when a lot of these organizations were starting, SIO, Wycliffe, JAARs, kind of the triad, we're all separate organizations, but at one time they were all connected. They started during the Great Depression. Well, there wasn't a lot of money then, but the churches, they did support. And you saw that really flourish up through about the 90s. And then it began to segment off. A lot of JAAR's support today comes from generous individuals. It comes from generous corporations. They love how we transfer skills and give the younger generation some really complex technical ability. So we get corporate donations from very well-known companies that you would think, wow, they're given to a mission aviation organization, but they really like what we do. We have a strong apprentice program. We've got 40 young individuals and families training at JAARs as I speak right now in this training cycle in this spring. And then we get it from aviation organizations. We have wonderful long-time supporters of us that would be well known in the aviation industry, such as Preferred Air Parts, Coventry Engines. We've got Dynamic Aviation. A lot of these that are well-known industry names, and they've been extraordinarily generous to us over the years. So we get it really from all quarters. And it's God's economy. He moves through his people. None of it makes sense. People ask, they say, well, okay, so aviation, even in the commercial realm, is kind of a narrow margin. How do you make all this work? And my response is, I don't have a clue. But people provide it, and God moves in the hearts of his people, and we've got a fleet of 46 aircraft in the JAARS Alliance that do this on 4 continents, 3 of them with rainforests. So it's truly remarkable to see how all of that works.
It really is. And, again, for those watching or listening and want to support this cause, it's JAARS, JAARS.org, and it's simple. You can go onto their website. And, for many people, we have busy lives, et cetera, and we would love to help support. What are different levels that we can help support, if it might be a day of service or if it's just monetary?
There's a lot of ways, really 3 ways. People can partner with us, maybe... I'm Bubba from Chitlin Switch, Oklahoma, and I can't go to a rainforest jungle, but, I can help support and pray, and we have a lot of folks that do that. Others, they're technically minded, and they're like, hey, I'd kind of like to come and do this. 4-wheel drive vehicles, boats, planes, sign me up, so they can come and serve with us that way. The other way that they can do it is that they can help volunteer. We have... a couple of hundred volunteers typically just at the JAARS base that come. Some will come seasonally during the summer. Many of them have high skill, extraordinary mechanics that, they're IA sign-offs and they've been running big corporate shops, and, they'll walk in and they'll roll up their sleeves and they'll help. We have others that do... maybe they're IT specialists, they're nurses, whatever, they work in our clinics, all kinds of skills. So there are a lot of ways that people can come and volunteer. We have a lot of retirees. They've done things in their life, and, the kids are out of the house, and they're like, yeah, I got family kind of down in the South, and I'm going to go, and they come and they live here, and they work. So we could not do what we do without our volunteers. They provide us a lot of skilled labor that we just ordinarily couldn't afford otherwise. There's many ways to serve. And if you're interested in that, you can go to the website, JAARS, JAARS.org, And there's ways to serve. I mean, just, even an infantryman can understand it. You click on it, you go there, and you look at what are you interested in, and it'll show you ways that you can partner with us. You can come work with us and go out on the mission and learn the skills and the trades, or you can use the ones you've acquired and volunteer here.
Going back to being accepted in this, and I really want to get to Leslie's questions. As far as a lot of people that wind up at a lot of the mission flying, they come for the humanitarian mission, they stay for the word. What is your criteria for someone, say, people give to all different organizations, for someone who's not a believer but really believes in the humanitarian mission?
We get grants like that. We just got a sizable grant because it's a big foundation that they give grants to people that do affordable housing for certain segments. We qualified on every count of that with our missionary housing, that people come here and they live here when they train, and they gave us a sizable grants to help on our renovations. And so it's not necessarily that things only come from Christian organizations and the support. Oftentimes they don't. I mean, a lot of nonprofits are existing on other people's generosity, and they don't have a lot to give themselves with thin margins. So we will see a lot of corporate goodwill, and we welcome that. They, in turn, they got to give it to somebody. I mean, either Uncle Sam's going to get it and waste it, or they can give it to something good cause that's going to help people and help their skills. And then on, like you had mentioned earlier, Carl, kind of on the humanitarian side, the medical side, things like that, there's overlap. We see that with humanitarian organizations overseas. And while they may not believe in our Christian mission, they understand that what we do does help the population there, so there'll be overlap, and we'll receive some support from them, and we will even convey them and help them get where they need to go, depending upon, if there's overlap in location.
Absolutely. It's 100% good in all directions. And I know, Leslie, you've been involved in some missionary and work, and also in missions. If you looking at this organization, I know she's going to chomp at the bit. I want to get involved. Tell us a little bit about some of your experience, especially with some of these aviation organizations that are out there.
Well, the mission aviation organizations, I honestly, because I'm fairly new to aviation, I mean, being at my age is kind of, I didn't start it as a high schooler or college age student. In fact, I was scrolling through Facebook today and it popped up in my memories. I got my private pilot certificate 10 years ago today.
Awesome.
Wow,
So
congratulations.
private pilot anniversary. But once if you're a pilot, once you start flying, the bug bites hard, and you just,
Absolutely.
it's forever until the day you go to Jesus. And but on the mission side, from a very young age, I was involved with missions organizations through church, grew up Southern Baptist, and eventually John and I, we spent a lot of time overseas on short-term mission trips, eventually spending served two different times overseas with our boys as full-time missionaries. But one of my questions was, we lived in relatively easy places. We were in France for a while, we were in the Middle East for a while, but a very nice, easy place to live. Now, but we did have some challenges. I mean, the biggest one being leaving your family, leaving your friends. We didn't know anybody where we were moving. I mean, we kind of met some of our teammates just over a phone call. But how does JAARS equip? Let's say if I'm someone who, Jesus Christ forgave me, and my life was changed years ago, and I'm a believer, and I'm in the Word, and I'm going to church regularly, and I'm feeling this kind of pulling, this calling in my heart to use my skills in aviation, whether it's being a pilot or mechanic overseas, and I'm interested in this. What kind of support do you guys give those missionaries who are full-time in these very remote places? I can only imagine the challenges, the loneliness,
I'll give
even
you
just the day to day, plane
sure.
breaking down in the bush.
Yeah. I'll give you a real world example that we faced earlier this year, a dengue fever outbreak in Indonesia. And it ravished our JAARS Alliance partner there, Yajasi. One of the headmasters of the school, his daughter, 15 years old, she died of the fever. So that really tears through a mission community. You've served on the field. You know what that's like. Everybody knows each other. And then we had several evacuations. And fortunately, we had the assets to get them evacuated. And we were able to make several life-saving trips to Australia for them. And okay, that's fine for the missionaries. What about the nationals? Well, in the same places, and it seems like it's every spring, although you don't really have seasons in the rainforest. It's like that all year long. But we do odd medical evacuations that you just would not normally see. I can show you recent pictures of arrows in chests and spears in sides, and they're broken off and taped up, and you got this kind of, pecked-looking man, sitting there shirtless with an arrow in his chest, and we're able to medevac them and get them to safety. If you're serving on the field, knowing that you have a couple of basic things, a way to educate your children and a life-saving medevac, that becomes essential. And if you have your basic supplies and you have just the hope of a life-saving medical evacuation, we found that people are willing to go into really difficult circumstances and places to do that. So what we do is vital. We're the kind of behind-the-scenes piece of that, but knowing that plane can get there and it can help and it can evacuate, or that helicopter, becomes really reassuring.
On the aviation side, you mentioned a lot of times your training facility in North Carolina and the training that I'm sure is ongoing on the field, besides just to learn as you go, what kind of, situation am I going to be in today? So how does that go beyond, let's say if I'm a commercial pilot, I meet the minimum qualifications to become a full-time missionary.
Sure.
How does that look? What are some examples of that training that I would go through that goes beyond
great question.
eights on pylons and short and soft field work?
Right. Well, the first thing, that we kind of look at is what we call knowledge, skills, and attitudes. When I first came to JAARS, people, asked me, they said, well, do you know what the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, KSAs are? And I said, yeah, it's everything I don't have, but here we are. We look at what do they think? How will they problem solve? Will they fit in as a team? Do they do well in remote places? You don't know the answers to those questions, but you can look at kind of indicators of how they might interact with other people. The joke is no one ever left the mission field because they didn't get along with the airplane. It was usually because they had human conflict with others or whatever. So we try to really look at that initial evaluative process to see how do they serve? How do they have a heart for other people? How do they interact with others? Can they take instructions? Can they lead? These are all factors that we look at, not unlike the military or maybe some of your other segments of society, that require that type of thinking and skill. If you possess that, and we think you're trainable, we'll figure out a way to get the rest of that skill. Typically, if you're coming from a very highly honed, reputable mission aviation school, like Moody Aviation, for example, or the School of Mission Aviation Technology in Lowell, Michigan, these are two feeder schools that are just exceptional in terms of the people that they provide. And then you have your universities. That have the flight programs, and maybe they're Christian, maybe they're secular, it doesn't matter. But you have believers there that feel a call to missions. What we'll typically find is they need an instrument and commercial rating. That gets them to at least 250 hours minimum. We had to really revamp when I came to JAARs. Our boomers are leaving in huge numbers. They possess massive amount of skill. We wanted to get that skill transferred as quick as we could on the field, even before people age out. You know, a lot of our boomer pilots, the young ones, are early 60s. So how do we transfer that skill? It meant that we had to reach deeper into the pool earlier. So we started an apprentice program that allowed people maybe at the 250 mark instead of the 500-hour mark. And then it's like, okay, if they have everything we want, we tell them, go get 250 more hours and learn a bunch of bad habits, and we'll train you out of them when you come. It's like, why not train them now? And we could maybe get them there in another 100 hours or 150. And it was a different way of thinking, but it's been successful. And then also to try to get them in, rather than having them go hat in hand and raising their support, which worked in an America that it was different when we were growing up. It's less now. Denominational support and the churches that are out there, it's just structured different. So we had to look at combinations and ways to how can we get people here quickly, and then do hybrids where maybe they can raise some and then we can pay some organizationally, rather than have them raise it through some partnered organization. So we really came up with a lot of different combinations. Today, with our successful surge with the apprentices, we have about 22 apprentices right now that are going through training. Half of them will be deployable by the end of the year. Many of them will be going to Africa. It's successful. So we've learned from that. Now we're creating a path where, depending upon where they're at flight-wise, they can come in at the, or maintenance-wise. They have to have an A&P license minimum. They will come in, maybe they need a year instead of the normal 6-month track. Maybe they need 2 years, but they got what we want. And using that combination will add up to meet our quotas to the end of the year. I say all of that to say this. If you have the call and you've got the aptitudes and attitudes that we're looking for, and you're trainable, we can figure out a path. We can figure out a way to get you there.
So, Steve, looking at this, you know, I don't think I heard this, but seeing that, and we read in the news that there's been, you know, a surge in people attending church. Has that been something that you've seen affecting people that want to get involved in mission flying?
That's a great question, Carl. And people often ask, you're like, well, you know, you think young folks even care about it? Well, you know, every generation says that. I mean, you know, we've been, you know, you probably go back to when they were wearing tricorn hats. You know, oh, I don't know about these young Americans. You know, they're going to be able to do this. Every generation says it. I look at it like this. God raises up his people to do his work every generation. So let's just go find those people and not worry about it. They're out there. And they're out there in massive numbers. It's so encouraging to see the young folks that have been coming into the organization. And in many ways, they're far more connected than when you and I were growing up. You know, our parents, the World War II Korea generation, you know, they were... You know, they were kids in the Depression, and they went and cut their teeth and doing hard things. And then, you know, they taught us to be resourceful, be polite, but figure it out. Don't come crying to me. Go do it, and whatever. But today, the generations are much more connected. What are you working on? This? Hey, cool. Can I help? Sure. Can I bring some friends? And then there's a chat chain, and before you know it, you got 12 people working on a problem. They're going to solve it. That's wonderful, especially in the type of work that we're doing. They're so interconnected, and they have, I think, better relational skills and emotional skills than sometimes we would think that you would need. And I'm greatly encouraged by the current generation. Our generation, we're the only living generation that was 100% analog growing up, and now we're 100% digital. But not them. This is all they've known. And, I can look at my phone and say it's a phone, and they're like, no, the only time I talk on it is to call mom, and that's it. They use it for everything else. And what we find is if you don't have young blood in your organization, you just don't look with the creativity and the possibility that you would as you get, a little longer. I liken it in a runway example. If I've got 7,500 foot of runway and I'm at the 6,000 marker before taking off, I'm like, I don't know if I got enough runway to take off. Well, with what we fly, you've got plenty of runway. But it looks different. But if you're at the threshold and you got 7,500 foot of runway ahead of you, or even 5,000, you're like, let's go. Let's just go do this. And that's what we see, that vitality. And what I've found is the best way to get old dogs up off the porch is introduce pups. They'll get irritated and they'll growl and they'll whatever, but after a while they're out in the yard wagging their tail with vitality just as much as the next one. And we've seen that in our organization as we've seen a rebirth of JAARs and this work that we're doing. I'm greatly encouraged by the current generation, and we are seeing that they are deeply committed in their faith. I think it's accurate what you said, that we are seeing a resurgence in that type of commitment, and they want their lives to count. They want them to mean something, and they're looking to invest and do that earlier, not later after they've made, a bunch of mistakes. So I'm greatly encouraged by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, that's some other parts of your mission that we didn't talk about, and I really want to get to, is the medical evacuation. I mean, we did talk about there's this focus on that. Obviously, everybody can get around that, and we talked about mission flying, but also this is something that no matter who you are, you can support. Tell us a little bit as to why that's become something that you're focusing on more.
Well, we've always done it. In fact, a lot of the impetus for why we started was, could we get emergency medical evacuation to people that were living in remote places? Yes, we want to bring them God's word, and that's primary, but you got to keep the people alive that are doing it. So it's just inherent. And then you have compassion for those that are there. In any given month, on any one of our stations, you're going to have some type of MedEvac. You're going to have a baby that needs emergency attention from a village. You're going to have, like we had mentioned, odd things, arrow strikes, or things we don't normally deal with. Fevers, dengue fever, malaria. I mean, different things that become debilitating. All of these are not the exception. They're just, okay, when are we going to do another one of these? And then we have partnerships on the field, because we're not commercial operators. We're humanitarian space with a lot of our national agreements with different countries. But it's typically, for the aviation geeks out there, it's kind of a Part 91 type of stuff rather than a Part 135 commercial. And because of that, you're operating in odd allowances and spaces with your air operations certificates in those countries. But they will allow you to do certain things, and medical is almost always one of those humanitarian things that they will allow. So we will do medevacs for other people, and that generates funds. And then those funds can be used to sustain the program and build your maintenance reserves and keep the lights on, and then do the work for the others so that they're not having to pay for that. You're able to take them there to do the work. It becomes really symbiotic and interoperating. And then you have partners that maybe they have medical concerns or medical missions. For example, World Medical Mission, which Samaritan's Purse is a big supporter of. We actually do help with them. Gabon, for example, They bring in doctors all the time to a hospital in Bungalow in Gabon, West Africa. They don't get there without our pilots. We fly them there. And so we're taking doctors that have come from around the world to go to a remote hospital to work in those communities. And it all works together like that. So it really is at multiple levels, from the emergency evacuation to even good medical partnerships that you can help and assist others that want to come.
So before we have to wrap up here in a few minutes, I just want to make sure, Leslie, we can get some of your questions in, and then we're going to get to definitely how you can reach out and become part of this great organization. So Leslie, you have another question?
You know, with all of our technology, even me having, John and I have been over 35 countries on short-term mission trips, and the 2 times we've actually lived overseas, we get stuck in our daily lives, and we just forget, the world that's out there. And I don't think people realize, when you talked about the beginning of the episode about all the different languages, even within the confines of a small geographic location, and how many of those languages or those ethno people groups do not have access to the gospel of Jesus Christ in their language. So just can you say shortly just how are you marrying the MedEvac, the aviation, the mechanics, the carrying people to and from, and marrying that with getting the gospel of Jesus into the hands of those people?
Sure. You got to be the hands and feet of Christ. If you're a good neighbor, you got access. It really helps that they see that you care. And then culturally, you have Professor Highbrow at some institution, that thinks, these missionaries are destroying these cultures. That's just a bucket of nonsense. If you preserve their language, their culture survives. If their language dies, they are assimilated into some other people, and it's completely lost. And so when we go in and translate and literize a language and translate and give them the Word of God, we're actually preserving the culture in their heart language. And they can put beads and feathers on it and do whatever, that's fine. But we really are preserving that community, and it's extraordinary to see. And then they begin to flourish. So it really is the core of what we do. Last month, I was out on the Amazon and flying with our JAARs Alliance partner down there, South American Mission Air. And we operate a float plane, a couple other 206 Cessnas. You fly 3 hours over absolutely nothing but broccoli to get to the start of nothing. And then when you get to the start of nothing, you get in a boat and you get out and navigate to these villages, and you get out. We were out with the Takuna tribesmen. Extraordinary. And they have real need. And simple things where it's just knowledge. It's just maybe exposure to things that they haven't had. But now you've got Takuna pastors and scholars and medics and things that have been trained from other villages up or downstream. And now they are able to minister to their own people because they have transportation to be able to do that through air, land, and sea operations, which JAARS focuses on. We're primarily aviation, but like I said, we have boats and we have a couple of ships and we have a lot of four-wheel drive vehicles. So it really is a combination of all of that to get to those remote places.
To keep all this running and to keep the boats, the aircrafts, helicopters, all vehicles, all types. One of the things that you can do if you're watching or listening is help out through donations. And it's real simple. JAARS.org, JAARS.org. And any little bit, I'm sure, counts and helps. No matter what you can give, will go towards this wonderful organization. But, what else, Steve? What else can people do that are out there and might want to give more and learn how to do that?
I appreciate that, Carl, because we all know that world events right now are stressing economies. They're stressing the supply chain. The tariff wars, the attacks in the Middle East, and the different things that are disrupting fuel supply. we have watched a 25 to 30% increase literally in just a few weeks to our aviation fuel. And at $600 a flight hour for a turbine engine, and now it's $800 an hour in 3 weeks. Those are budgeted things that weren't in the budget. So I really appreciate that. And we don't go around, play sad song and show pictures of sad puppies and all of that. We firmly believe that God's going to sustain this work, and he does. But people do like to know, like you ask, what are some things and what are the impact? For us, the increase in fuel supply and prices is having a big impact on us, and so we could really use help that way. The other thing, the volunteers, if you've got expertise, you can work in Waxhaw. We have people that even go overseas and do different things and help. Skills. You say, well, I can't really go to a jungle, but maybe I can come and help. I'm a sheetrocker or I'm a general contractor. Great. We've got a lot of housing, that needs, roofs from time to time, or will need a renovation, or things that you just really don't think of. The JAARs base has 4 airstrips. We have 75 buildings, 525 people, 630 acres right here in Waxhaw, USA. And we train up in the Appalachian Mountains to do a lot of our mountain flying. So it's a big operation. And anything you would need to run a base like that, you need people that have skills in almost every segment that you would need to run any business or anything else. If you've got a skill, it's probably needed. So you can go to our website and you can look at that and just tell us, hey, I'm kind of wired like this. Do you have anything like that? And before you know it, you might be getting a call. If you want to learn some of our extraordinary stories and hear the folks that are out there, we also have a podcast called Uncharted. You can find that on the wherever you get your podcast. Extraordinary stories. Jim Strait just recently back shared about him being hijacked a couple of months ago. A guy crawled in the tail cone of the plane and hid himself behind the barrier of the luggage compartment. Wasn't found. The next thing you know, he's greeting the pilot. Now, I won't spoil the story. It's an extraordinary story. We had Ray Rising that came on. He talked about being in captivity for 835 days by rebels. Extraordinary stories in mission aviation and the missionaries on the field. So you can go to the Uncharted podcast and see that. And then our social media, obviously, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it might be, just, type in JAARs and there we are.
Well, definitely tell people to go towards that Uncharted podcast. You can probably find those links, JAARs.org, and some of those links to those videos that you talked about. And I really recommend anybody that wants to get involved in any level, any little bit helps. It really does. Whether it's $1 or it's a year or 10 years of your time, doing what you're doing is very important. It gets the word out. It also is incredible, the mission for humanity that you perform. So no matter what your background is, this is an organization that you can get behind, and that's easy to find. JAARS.org, JAARS.org. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. This has been absolutely lovely having you on, and brother, you're really getting the word out, and I wish I could talk for another 10 hours because there's so many more things that I'd love to discuss.
Well, come on up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come visit us. So seriously, Carl, come on up. We'll let you get up in our aircraft and stuff and show you around. We would love to host you out here sometime.
I would absolutely love that. I appreciate
20
that.
miles south of the big Charlotte airport, and that's a major hub. So
I can get there easily. Absolutely. We're definitely going to do that. And we'll bring a camera. We'll do another podcast from up there.
We'd love that.
Encourage people to go to your website, JAARS.org. Again, Steve, I appreciate you coming here, and also Leslie for coming back on. And for those that haven't heard us for a while, we are back doing regular episodes, and we're also doing some video podcasts. And think about this. You can listen to us all year long live on liveatc.net/SNF. And what is that? That's Sun and Fun Radio. And we'll have these interviews and other interviews on Sun and Fun Radio throughout the year. But most importantly, get out there, do some flying. And I do want a big shout out to our sponsor, and that's Aviation Careers Podcast, for putting out that scholarships guide, which Leslie has been a big proponent and a big help with. So, folks, one of the things I want you to do is, if this touched your heart, check it out at JAARs.org. JAARS.org. You can check out those links on our website. Most importantly, safe flying out there. We'll talk to you next episode.